Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Brandt, and I'm Assistant Director
Sounds
for
great.
Sounds good.
Computation at the Center for Computation and Technology at Louisiana State University. With me is Patrick Deal, who is a research scientist at the Center for Computation and Technology. Today, we are going to present our investigations into teaching with a talk called Interactive C++ Code Development Using C++ Explorer and GitHub Classroom for Educational Purposes.
Okay, let me start with the motivation. And I think most of you experienced, if you teach a course for C++ programming, that major burden for the students is to set up the IDE, install a compiler, and compile the first Hello World program. And Steve and I experienced this behavior in our teaching. And we were thinking that probably we should do something to make this step a little bit easier. And so what we wanted to do, we wanted to provide a complete installation to the students without the burden of the setup. And we were looking around, and if you look at the Python ecosystem, you have the Jupyter notebooks where you can log in to a server or run it on your computer, and you have this nice web interface with these cells. And we were thinking it would be really nice to have something similar for C++ development. And what we were doing here, we were extending the Jupyter notebooks for interactive C++ development. So students could type C++ code instead of Python code into the cells of a notebook. And you can see on the left-hand side, a Jupyter notebook, and it's looking really like a Jupyter notebook. But if you look at the first cell, we include C++ headers. And in the second cell, we can define the standard vector. And in the third cell, we can just type a C++ style for loop. And you can see as the output, we were just iterating over this vector. And we were thinking to having this interactive C++ development, students can more rapidly experiment with different IDs and algorithms. And in addition, we were using GitHub Classroom to teach the students version control, because we believe it's really important and it's a really benefit if they can put this to their CV for future jobs in computer science. Can you go to the next slide? And I will go over the overview of our talk. Steve will tell you a little bit about the setup and the technologies we used. Then we will show you some prior works. We will go again a little bit more in detail over the example I mentioned previously and the motivation. And we used this tool in a course where I taught parallel computational mathematics to students last fall. And we did a small survey among these students, and they gave us some feedback, how they liked this tool. And we will finish with the conclusion and outlook.
All right, now to talk about setup. Everything that we have is contained in a single Docker image, which is about 8 gigabytes. This is rather large, but not so large that you can't consider downloading it over the internet for your laptop. If you want to use it as a student, you can run our code in a notebook. Alternatively, the same Docker image can be used to run a Jupyterhub installation with GitHub for authentication. The GitHub authentication can operate in two methods. You can authenticate users to your GitHub server in 2 ways. One, you can put a list of the users that you want to allow onto the server into an accept list, which is maintained inside the server. Alternatively, you can provide a secret word, which users can use to authenticate their own GitHub login names. This is useful in settings where you have a large number of students and you're doing a 1-day tutorial, and you can't afford to take the time to update the accept list for each person in the room. A third mode is that you can use this with what we call create your own login authenticator. This is another authentication method for Jupyterhub, which allows the students in a classroom for, say, a 1-day setting to create their own login names and passwords to get access to the server. The server has a number of packages pre-installed. First is Cling, which is a C++ interpreter developed at CERN as a tool for scientists working on the Large Hadron Collider. The next is HPX, a parallel programming framework developed for general purpose programming, both of nodes and clusters. It contains the latest implementations of the C++ standards and proposed standards for parallel algorithms. Finally, there's Blaze, which is a high-performance C++ math and vectorization package. It is completely portable, high-quality code. So part of the reason for this project is that the installation of Cling is not trivial. The installation of HPX is not trivial. And getting all these things to work together in a single coherent image is significant work. So let's take a look at the way the notebooks work now from a student point of view. Students can type in code such as stdcout, help, left, insert hello world, insert standard endl. And the first time you see code like this interpreted in a running environment, it's kind of surreal because it seems so unnatural to see C++ code being interpreted. But it's also kind of fun. The notebooks at CERN do not have any magics as part of their construction. We found it convenient to add %% write file and %% bash functionality. This allows students to create and save C++ files and compile them with a command line so that they can compare and contrast running interactively with running in the more traditional way. The problem with the Cling notebooks is that they are limited by the one definition. So, for example, if you define a function, you cannot redefine it in C++ as you could in, say, Python. Occasionally, you will encounter core dumps or syntax errors in the notebook, and these may kill your kernel and cause the loss of all work so far. In addition, there is no support for the thread local language feature in the underlying LLVM, which means that std async won't work. However, HPX async, which we have included through the HPX package, will work and is semantically equivalent. Because we thought it would be useful to provide multiple interfaces to C++, just so that students had options and we could see what kinds of things appeal to them most, we also have another interface to Cling, which is to use Cling from a Python notebook. In this mode, there is a replay function to restore your work if it's lost due to a syntax error or a sig fault, and it allows passing string data between C++ and Python. The way this works is you put %% Cling in the top of a cell, and then the rest of the code in that cell is C++ code. Yet a third interface that we provide to C++ through the notebook is through PyBind 11. So Cling is based on Clang version 5.0.0, and maybe you want a newer compiler for some particular language feature that you wish to test. The idea is to provide a C++ code and a doc comment for a Python function, and then use a decorator to extract and compile the code, and then link it to Python with PyBind 11. We'll show you demonstrations of all three of these technologies in a bit. Now Patrick will tell you about the survey.
Yes. So since we tested this tool in a course, we were sending a short survey to the students, and here the additional results and the raw data is available at the reference too. And we were just asking some, first, how difficult was it to set up Git? And we had the option easy, moderate, very easy, and somewhat easy. And you can see, since we only had 4 students in this course, it was very easy for one, somewhat easy for one, and so on. And the second thing is, we asked them, when did you start using the notebook? And one student was using it from the beginning on. 2 students were using it from the start on. One started in the first quarter, and the third one started in the last quarter. And here we have to say that at the beginning of the course, we teach normal C++, and there is no need to have the HBX library to do parallel computations. And so some students preferred to use their own computer, but once they had to use HBX, which is really difficult to install, they started to use the notebooks. And at the end of the course, all students used the notebooks, and most of them were quite happy with the functionality. But also some asked for additional feature to include, for example, some debugging functionality in the notebooks. Can you go to the second slide? And then we also asked how often they use the server and notebook. And two of them agreed that they used it often. One is really neutral, and one strongly agrees that students should use the server. And we also liked or asked how they liked the notebook as an editor. And here, one strongly agrees it's a nice feature. One student was agreeing, and two students were more moderate.
Now I'd like to show you some of the functionality. Here is a notebook we use for one of the lectures in our course. You can execute cells one at a time. So this just read and processed the IO stream library. You can see that it does it quite quickly. This processes the stdc out hello. So this is already, we've gotten the hello world part done. You can likewise incorporate strings and define constants and print those out. Frequently, the notebook also prints the type of the object that is the result of your expression. You can get the size, number of columns, and so on. This gives you a feel for the basic functionality of the C++ notebook as provided by CERN.
And as a conclusion, we have shown a novel teaching environment adapted to teaching parallel C++ programming and source code management, and the extensions to the utilized tools to make the notebooks richer and the interactive experience more complete. And the students' feedback was mostly positive, but from a small group. And we want to add the requested features from last year's course, if possible, to the C++ Explorer. And we want to redo the surveys in the fall 2020 class with 10 students in this year. And we also put some links on the next slide because, as Steve told you, we have this Docker image for the C++ Explorer on GitHub. We have the source code, and we also have the examples for the described usage on a GitHub repo. And we also have the lecture slides, exercises, and course notes. Here you can see all the links at the bottom of this slide. And feel free to use the C++ Explorer and course material in your teaching. And we would also be happy to get some feedback if you use the C++ Explorer or the course material. And yeah, we are open for questions, and thanks for attending.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Just a very quick one. There's quite intriguing, that interactive running C++ on the fly. I'm sort of intrigued about how it works under the hood. I'll have to read up about it. But it looks like you're just would this be is this really just suitable for teaching basic sort of C++ syntax, or is this tool actually going to be usable for, say, teaching object-oriented design and things like that in the C++ context?
I don't see why it wouldn't be usable for teaching object-oriented design or more advanced topics.
Okay, so you can still create classes in the workbook and then just run them.
Yes, you can. In my examples in my course, I have the implementation of an n-body problem where we have a class for the data structures, we have a simulation class, and everything works. So you can teach C++. The only thing is that standard async will not work if you want to have this asynchronous programming of C++, but everything else will work. And so you couldn't do anything what you can do with C++, except of the standard async.
Yeah, and
Very
we
good.
have HTTX async, so that's kind of covered.
Very nice.
I'm wondering actually what you thought of GitHub Classroom.
I
What we
couldn't
thought
understand.
Yeah,
couldn't
what we
understand the
thought about
question.
GitHub Classroom.
Yeah, I think a couple of us wanted to ask a question at the same time, so there's another one. But yeah, I was curious about your thoughts on GitHub Classroom, and did you align it or associate it with an organization or an institution, or is this your own group?
So GitHub Classroom works that users have to have a GitHub account, but you have to generate an organization, and GitHub Classroom is attached to your organization. And so you have to ask the students to join this organization, and then you can just go to the interface, and it's the concept that you have a Git repo for each of the exercises. You can include a template repo with some starting file or some template files, and then GitHub Classroom sends an email to all of the students, and they get an invitation to join the repo. And my students really liked, because before they had to send emails with the source code to the teacher had to download the email, and it was a quite nice experience. However, for the first time, and for students never use Git, it's a little bit a burden. But now, after the second exercise, everyone was able to submit, and I think they really enjoy this feature. And the positive feedback from the survey, we could not show it in the talk, was that after a few submissions, students really appreciated to do this because it's much easier. They have version control, and so they can play around, and if they break codes, they can go back. And I think it's a really nice experience, but probably the first two exercises are difficult to set up for students. But I did some tutorials, and so I think it's fine for them.